ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדברו. We have already spoken about this in previous occasions. God tells Moses he's not allowed to go to the promised land. Why not? Well, we are not very sure. It could be because Moses disobeyed God's instruction. God told him on one occasion, when there was no water, go and speak to a stone, and the stone will give water. But instead of speaking to the stone, Moses went and hit the stone. So he didn't fulfill God's instruction really 100%, because God said, speak to the stone, and instead he went and hit the stone. Now, is that such a big sin? Let us say Moses is a great man, and he should obey God in every aspect. Every word of God should be holy to him. So maybe give him some kind of punishment, if a punishment is necessary. But not only that, Moses pleads with God, please let me into the promised land. Moses is sorry for what he did. There's something called teshuvah. I should be allowed to be sorry for what I did. This is what Yom Kippur is. You have to pardon. There's atonement. Why is it that God doesn't listen to Moses' plea? Let me into the land of Israel. And let us bear in mind that to live in Israel is very important. We had 3 patriarchs. Abraham was born in Ur, outside of Israel. But then he went to Israel and died in Israel, lived the rest of his life in Israel. Isaac, Yitzchak, the second of the patriarchs, was born in Israel, lived in Israel, died in Israel. And the third one, Jacob, was born in Israel, lived in Israel, but the last decades of his life he spent really in Egypt. And our rabbis say that Isaac is special because of this, because he never left the land of Israel. He was born, lived, and died in the land of Israel. If it's so important to live in the land of Israel, why did God not let Moses into the land of Israel? Because he made a mistake. Is that reason enough in order to prevent him from fulfilling such an important task, such an important mitzvah? He should have been allowed to live in Israel, but yet God does not allow him to do so. The Torah begins with Bereshit. It tells us how the universe was created, and Rashi, our biggest commentator, says, maybe the Torah should have really started from a different point. Because the Torah is not a book of cosmology. It's not astronomy that the Torah is trying to teach us. It's a book of morals, of ethics, how to live in this world. So really, the Torah being a book of laws, it should have started with the first law that the Jewish people received. That was in Egypt. God told them, this is the first month of the year. That was just before the Exodus. Why does the Torah start with Bereshit? So Rashi answers, that is to show you that God, by being the creator of the world, is the legal owner of the world. So he could therefore say, I want to give this piece of property, this part of geography, I'm going to give to the Jewish people because the world is mine. I created it. That is the reason. I would have said maybe something else. When Abraham comes onto the scene of history, this is after many generations of deviations. People didn't behave according to basic moral principles. This is why God sent a deluge. The entire world was inundated with water, destroyed. Only one family was left. That was Noah. And even Noah himself, after he saved himself, he really became drunk. He wasn't really the right kind of person. Otherwise, maybe our history would have started with him. It is not until Abraham comes onto the scene that we have the beginning, really, of monotheism, of religion the way we know it in the Western world. What is the first instruction that God gives this Abraham? The first thing he tells him is, what? You have to get out of the place where you were born. You have to get out of your land. You have to get out of your city. You're going to go to a promised land. He doesn't even tell him where he has to go. But somehow Abraham was such a refined spiritual man. He understood where he had to go. God told him to go to Israel. So the first mitzvah, the first commandment really in the Torah for Abraham is go to the land of Israel. Maybe the Torah should have started with that. If that is so, how come God tells Moses just the opposite? Abraham, he tells, you have to go to the land of Israel. God tells Moses, you know what? No, you cannot go to the land of Israel. That is terrible. That is the basic tenet of Judaism, really. Yet, Moses is not allowed to do that, notwithstanding that he pleads with God, please let me in. Let me go back to something else. We are in Mount Sinai. God is giving the 10 commandments. One of the commandments is to observe the Sabbath. So, the 10 commandments reads as follows. You have to rest on the 7th day of the week. Why? Because God created the world in 6 days. In 6 days he worked. On the 7th day he rested. That's why you have to rest. You know, it's a universal message, really. God created everything in 6 days, and you have to rest on the 7th day. But we know what happened to those tablets of the law, because our ancestors started worshiping a golden calf because Moses didn't come back on time, and God told Moses, go down, take a look what's happening. And Moses, when he saw them dancing around a golden calf, he took the 2 tablets of the law and smashed them into pieces. So the first tablets of the law were destroyed. He had to go up once again to Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, and a second set of tablets of the law were written. What is written in these second tablets when it comes to why do we have to observe the Sabbath? It says like this. 6 days you shall work, the 7th day you are going to rest. Why? Because you were slaves in Egypt, and God took you out of Egypt. A slave cannot choose when to rest. God gives you the possibility of resting 1 day a week. Tells you to rest 1 day a week. The second set of tablets speak of something else. It is not a universal message anymore about the Sabbath. It is a message directed to the Jewish people. Maybe they couldn't comprehend the first one. But when God told them the reason why, because I took you out of Egypt, maybe this they understood. But basically, really, the 10 Commandments, the Torah, this is a message not only for the Jewish people. It is a message for everybody, for all of humanity. We were all created in the image of God. Why did God choose the Jewish people? Well, he needed a vehicle, a messenger, to bring the instruction to the rest of the world. And Moses was the exceptional figure that spoke to God and received this message. So that on the one hand, Moses had a task to do with the Jewish people. He took them out of Egypt. But he also had a universal task. He had to teach the entire instruction, the entire Torah, had to reach everybody else. The prophets understood this. They said, there come a day when God will be one and his name will be one. So that Moses could not be buried in the land of Israel, because Moses belongs to all of humanity, really. Jacob died in Egypt, and he made sure that his remains rest in the land of Israel. Joseph instructed that when you go out of Egypt, I want you to take my remains with you. I want to rest forever in Israel. And as a matter of fact, that was the task of Moses. He took his bones. He didn't reach Israel, but up to the limits of Israel. Yet, the remains of Moses are outside of Israel. Because in a sense, his message is not only to the Jewish people, it's toward everybody else. If you're Jewish, you should feel proud that God spoke to you. But remember, you're a messenger. You have to bring this idea to the rest of the world. The prophets understood this. There'll come a day when God will be one and his name will be one. How shall you do it? Shall you do it by converting the rest of the world? By convincing them? The problem is when you try to convince somebody, first you use words, you use ideas, but eventually you use force as well. No. The way to convince the rest of the world is by leading a moral life, an ethical life yourself. You have to serve as an example so that the rest of the world should see what it is like to live according to the Word of God. And eventually, the entire world will also understand that there is only one God in this world.